is Megan Ryan, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about blood lactate, sessions RPE, and exercise, how they all relate, and how they can be clinically applied. All right, so to begin, I'm going to talk a little bit about lactate. Lactate is produced during the breakdown of carbohydrates for energy. The main reason to form lactate is to regenerate the NADH needed to continue to oxidize glucose. Basically, in the presence of oxygen, it's converted back to pyruvate to be made into more NADH for energy. Now, when does lactate accumulate? Basically, lactate accumulates when the production of lactate is greater than the body can clear that lactate. So this occurs when there's an insufficient oxygen delivery, for example, when you are exercising. And then finally, what is blood lactate? Well, basically, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. It is the amount of lactate in the blood. I'm going to get in a little more into blood lactate and why it's important here in a couple slides. All right, moving on. What is SRPE? Well, SRPE stands for Sessions Rate of Perceived Exertion. Basically, it's a scale of 0 to 10, how hard you exercised for a given training session. I'm going to use running as an example because I'm a runner and it just makes sense to me, but you can apply this to any training session you do. So, for example, I go out on a 5-mile run, I come back, my coach asks me, maybe I even ask myself, how hard was that run on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 meaning I didn't run at all, I just sat there and rested, and 10 meaning that was the hardest run of my life. I gave it my all. I couldn't push any harder. That would be an example of Sessions RPE, Sessions Rate of Perceived Exertion. And basically, it's just a simple measure of internal training load as opposed to an external training load. An external training load is basically, a running example again, basically going out and running 5 miles. 5 miles would be that external load. Maybe I go out and run 30 minutes. 30 minutes of running would be my external load. So Sessions RPE just kind of gives us a more physiological internal training load as opposed to these external. All right, so let's go back for a minute to lactate and exercise. So, as previously mentioned, lactate accumulates when more is being produced than can be cleared out of the area. At this point, the body has reached lactate threshold, or it has also been called anaerobic threshold. And as you can see down here, I promised that we would talk about blood lactate again. Blood lactate concentration has actually been used to monitor exercise intensity for dynamic and resistance activities, according to Jenner and Vickery et al. Over here on the right, we see this little chart, lactate on the y-axis, speed, which can also be, I guess, switched out for intensity here on the x-axis. So you see as speed increases, so do lactate levels, all right? So this would be a good indicator of what intensity you are running at, or you are training at, I guess. Now, let's connect the two, blood lactate and Sessions RPE. Well, in a study by Abe et al., 2015, they showed that blood lactate levels actually correlate pretty closely to a Sessions RPE score. They used a Borg scale. We used another, or the common one that is used between athletes is that scale of 1 to 10. They used 7 to 19 for their scale. But regardless, it has been shown that blood lactate levels correlate closely to Sessions RPE score. So what's the implication for that? Who cares? Well, the implication is that it could provide a more convenient method of monitoring exercise intensity. So in certain sports, this Sessions RPE can be used as a means to potentially gather training information based on this internal physiological load that the athlete or patient is feeling. It could be important in monitoring an athlete's training more closely and making the monitoring more individualized. Now, okay, so that's great, but what about clinical applications? Well, in the clinic, it can be used to monitor a patient's therapy session. It can also track how a patient is responding to treatment from week to week with this simple measure. You can see how hard they're exerting themselves. So basically it can be used to make sure the patient is progressing and they're not exerting themselves too much. And here are my references. Thank you.